Unfair education in inner cities has been a relevant issue for many years. Without a proper education, many young kids are unable to gain the tools, the knowledge, and the instruction to obtain a successful career later in life. While the general issue in urban schools focuses around unfair opportunity, there are several problems that play a role into it. Some of these issues are standardized testing, shortage of teachers, the funding gap, overcrowding, and the achievement gap. By focusing on these key problems, we can put together the pieces to solve the problem with public education in inner cities. In my paper, I talked about these issues in detail and focused on the problems that cause this unfair gap in education. The first problem was standardized testing. While these tests can have major benefits such as testing grade appropriate material and overall measure a school's teaching success rate, there are also many disadvantages to it. Standardized tests can have large impacts on students, such as what level of classes the students will take the following semester, and even college decisions. This is an immense amount of pressure to put on students for one single test. What if they are having an off day? What if they could not afford the proper materials to study, or afford a tutor? Overall, some schools provide the material for students to study, but in low-income areas, there may not be the funds for it. There are many aspects that make these tests unequal and unfair. Standardized tests are graded by a machine, and students are given little to no feedback about the specifics of how they performed on the tests. Another aspect to this is that these tests focus on the norm or the masses instead of catering towards the specific needs of different demographics. Some schools may have a majority of native Spanish speakers, whereas other schools may be mainly English speaking. Because there is no individuality, it leaves more room for failure for those who do not fit that norm. The funding gap also plays a large role in the quality of education that urban schools receive. The funding gap refers to the gap in funding between poverty schools and those in wealthier districts. This lack of funding is seen in basic essential things such as lack of resources, books, outdated technology, and even things such as school counselors. Without these essentials, it becomes nearly impossible for students to come up to par educationally with students from other school districts. Another contributing factor is that many urban city schools have underqualified or not at all qualified teachers. How would you feel knowing that your children are being taught by someone who is not qualified to be a teacher? It's a scary thought knowing that this is a very real possibility in inner city schools. The reason that many of these schools are forced to do this is because there is a shortage of teachers who want to work in inner city schools. This is due to lack of materials, resources, being underpaid, and the stress of having larger classrooms due to overcrowding. This also means twice the work because they have so many students. A good example of this frustration that may come along with teaching in inner city schools is given in the movie Freedom Writers. This newly hired teacher feels frustration because the books that she is given for her students are outdated and irrelevant. When she asks about providing better books for her students, her boss declines. She then says, "What am I supposed to do? Buy them myself?"
Romeo and Juliet. That's a great gang story.
No, not the books. This is what we give them. It is Romeo and Juliet, but it's a condensed version. But even these, look how they treat them. See how torn up they are? They draw on them.
Miss Campbell, they know they get these because no one thinks they're smart enough for real books.
I don't have the budget to buy new books every semester when these kids don't return them.
So what do? Buy their books myself?
Well, that's up to you, but you've been wasting your money.
Is there someone else I can speak to about this?
And that's exactly what she does.
Dad, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not a social worker. I'm barely a teacher. Thank you. These kids, they're 14, 15 years old. If they make it through the day alive, that's good enough. And I'm supposed to teach them?
Listen to me. You're not responsible for their lives outside that classroom. Just do your job the best you can.
How? The administration doesn't give me any resources, no books, no support. So what should I do?
Fulfill your obligation to the end of the school year, but line up another position. Success follows experience, so get some more experience. But no matter what, you gotta remember it's just a job. If you're not right for this one, get another job.
You're gonna sell bras at a department store?
Just part-time. I'm having a little trouble getting books and things for the kids, so a little extra money will give me a little more freedom to do what I want. And this way you can play tennis with Evan after work.
Okay, let me get my head around this. You're gonna get an extra job to pay for your job.
It's just temporary, I promise. Once the kids' grades go up, I'll get a little more help from the school, and I get an employee's discount. Isn't that great? Want a new TV?
Yeah.
Excuse me, if I wanted to order any books in bulk, could I get some sort of a discount?
Because of lack of funding, school districts do not have the resources to make expansions or open new schools in order to compensate for the number of students. There are only so many resources per school, which makes it sometimes impossible to provide every student with the proper books and resources they need for every class, which in turn affects their learning. Secondly, because of overcrowding, classrooms are much larger than those in other schools. This makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for teachers to pay proper attention to students to help them understand what they are learning and to have one-on-one time with them. In my town, there used to be one high school that everyone had to attend, but as the population grew, the city chose to build a second high school in the same city in order to compensate for it. This allowed teachers at both schools to have smaller classrooms and get to know their students better. Lastly, students who receive less attention overall may feel discouragement and may be more likely to drop out. The achievement gap is something that happens as a result of all these unfair circumstances. The achievement gap is the gap in performance from poverty-stricken schools to those in more affluent areas. This is not something that happens naturally, but happens as a result of unfairness in our education system. This is displayed in standardized testing scores, percentage of dropouts, and GPAs. Although the problems with our education system certainly can't be solved overnight, there are some small steps we can take in the right direction. One way to better our standardized testing problem is to focus on creating equal but unique tests in order to better suit the differences in our students. Another idea is to have more than one chance at the tests in order to relieve students of pressure and stress, but also to give them the opportunity to study and perform better. Another way to have more qualified teachers in the urban school system could be to provide incentives to them, such as paying off their student loans. Fortunately, there are already some programs in place that do just that. Some ideas to help the funding gap could be to focus on funding for individual schools one at a time. There could also be a small tax in more affluent areas that focus specifically on low-income education. In order to fix overcrowding, the funding issues have to be addressed first. When more funding becomes available, it is possible to expand classrooms, have more qualified teachers, and more schools. A temporary fix to solve one-on-one time for teacher and students could be to have a teacher assistant in the classrooms. This way, students can have more attention from the teachers, but the school does not have to pay for a teacher with a degree. Public education in inner cities is an important issue to me because I believe in equal opportunity for all. I grew up in a middle-class home, so I was blessed enough to have a quality education. I went to a private school from preschool to 6th grade. The classes were small and the quality of education was pretty good. All my teachers got to know me each year and helped me focus on what I struggled with. After 6th grade, I transferred to a public school, which was a bit different for me, but overall I felt like the teachers, resources, and education were up to par. Although the classes were bigger, I still felt like I got the attention I needed from my teachers and the resources to help me if need be. Although it didn't affect me personally, I saw people that it did. At first, I was very surprised. If someone attends a smaller private school, it seems likely that they will receive a different education than those in a public education school. That seemed pretty straightforward. Private schools may have more funding because there is a tuition and there are less students to cater to. It was shocking and upsetting to me to think that even though we are all going to public schools, the education we are receiving is drastically different. This bothered me because it is so unfair. How is this still going on? It is particularly important to me because of my desire to be a social worker. I want to help better the lives of young kids, and knowing that this is how they are treated is upsetting and wrong. I think what upsets me the most is that these children do not know any better. This is what they are used to. Children who are lucky enough to get a quality education probably took it for granted. It doesn't seem out of the ordinary to expect your teachers to be certified in what they are teaching and to have books that are up to date. But some of these kids may not know what is out there and may never get to use their full potential due to unfortunate circumstances. In order to make changes, we need to start making people care and recognize these issues. They need to be known. It is easier to let a problem go on and do nothing about it than to buckle down and make changes. As aspiring social workers, I believe we play a large role in leading kids in the right direction and not letting them get caught in the cycle that is so easy to get into.
We've got to dig in on educational equity issues.
There's not just one challenge to face when we talk about achievement gaps. Even if we just talk about racial achievement gaps, we have students of color in high-income suburban districts that are lagging their white classmates. We have inner-city school districts that are high poverty, have a difficult time attracting teachers. So the work that needs to happen is to figure out how in each of these contexts we can make the changes that are necessary to produce the excellence to which we aspire. There are needs that kids in inner cities have that people in upper income suburbs never even imagine. But the most effective schools and teachers in the inner city adapt to those needs. They meet the kids where they are. They establish person-environment fit for these kids as they pass through the school. And if we can do that at some greater scale, it truly is plausible that we can have much less poverty in the next generations, and that we can have the society with regard to race that we want in the future.